beautiful and your boyfriend is a bag of shit. You don't have to put up with.
Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined once again by somebody I have an immense amount of respect for, the absolute amazing Stephen Tramontana. Steve, how you doing today, man?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me back on. I feel like it's been forever. The whole world has changed since the first time you and I chatted about first horror movies.
Right, man. And this is something that's so amazing to me because now not only have I worked with you through a podcast, but I've worked with you in person. I've been able to have real conversation with you, and you are a shitload taller than I imagined you being. So I also want to throw that out there real quick. It was amazing to meet you, and you guys obviously know by the thumbnail and by the title, Steve is one of the writers and the director of Bride of Killer Pinata. So obviously, first I want to talk about the process of making an indie film, because it's not like you walk into a studio and they're like, yo, here's $2.4 million, make us happy. What is the process for you in making an indie film, and how's that different than maybe a big budget film and what they might receive?
So it's interesting because I think our process of making an indie film is a little different because, one, we own all of our equipment. So we're not understanding, I think there's like two schools of thought when it comes to indie filmmaking. One is that you have your equipment so you can take your time, which is what we did, or you're, going from a rental house. So you have 3 days, Friday through Sunday, to get 1 million shots in, and you're just blazing. The trade-off, I think, is that it is how much resistance you get in the beginning, because when you're dealing with a budget, you obviously have your production managers, you have people running numbers, you've got folks that are just trying to make sure this investment is going to pay out, where you don't have as much of that. Really, more of your concern is how do we, because you don't have the resources, right? So you have a little less money, a little less time, and you're going, okay, we can't flaunt what we don't have. So how do we actually accomplish everything that we're trying to do? So the challenges are a little bit different. You don't have so many on the front end, you have them all in production and on the back end.
Well, and I think the good thing about Bride of Killer Pinata, it's a huge cast. When you look at a lot, obviously you have your main cast, but a lot of the supporting cast is a lot of friends and family that are just like, you know what? Let's do this. Let's make a fucking movie. Let's have a great time. Let's sit down with our friends and just do something amazing. And being on set and, even watching some of the clips when we're watching the movie and seeing friends that I have that I've made through you or through all this, it's amazing to see the performances that they did in this film. Pretty early in production, did you know, like when in the writing process, did you know I'm just going to be using a lot of friends and family that I've made along the way as a part of this film?
Good question. I don't think I gave it that much thought. I was really concerned about how we actually write this movie. Talking about a sequel, and you say, well, we've done it once before, right? We know what we're doing. And then you actually get into the work of kind of writing a sequel, and it becomes a little bit more daunting than you expect, because you're trying to figure out that alchemy, right? You're trying to figure out how much of the first one do we bring in, what's new, what's too new, what will throw people off, how do we, and it was very important to us that this movie be kind of a new thing while still retaining what people liked about the first movie. We didn't just want to repeat ourselves. So when it came to the idea of who would play what, I'm very lucky that we have Jen Kunkel, who loves casting. Jen,
huge shout out to Jen. Love Jen to death.
Dude, I can't do what Jen does. Like when we put the casting notice out, luckily Killer Pinata, the first one, had reached such a thing at that point that we had a much better response in terms of actors who were submitting auditions. Lord Shane, there's a character in the film called Lord Shane. He's kind of a goth mercenary. He by far had the most submissions. And Jen would just go through all these people were self-taping and stuff and come to us and be like, these are, the 15 or so today that I think are, we watched all of them. And so it was really nice because we did get such a good response from the Chicago acting community. And then we're very lucky that we have talented friends, and so what our other goal for this movie was that between Killer Pinata and this one, we've made probably 5 short films. And we've had the pleasure of working with so many good actors in those short films. And what I was trying to do was find somewhere that we could get any of the actors that we'd had in those short films in this film. And I think we got almost all of them in. We had all of them in, and then we had a cut scene. And so we got almost all of them in. So right. it was it was a way that that I didn't think too much about it, but we were lucky that we're surrounded by a good community that we could fall back on to get those roles filled out.
Well, and that's a testament not just to the success of Killer Pinata, but to you guys as, Angry Mule Productions and what you guys do and the name that you guys have. Because whenever I've talked to anybody, it's been nothing but positivity about what you guys do, especially you and Jen, because obviously, like Jesse's a friend of mine, and then the horror dads, they're good friends of mine. And, all these people that I've met through you or we've communicated through you have had nothing but the most respect and utmost nice things to say about you guys. Now, before we get into more about Bride of Killer Pinata, Stephen was kind enough to give me a couple scenes to show you guys. So real quick, we're going to show you the first scene that we want to show you from this film. And this is entitled Toxic Relationship.
Is this thing trying to talk to us?
I guess so. Should we try to talk back? If you can understand me, you're in a toxic relationship. He's no good.
You are beautiful, and your boyfriend is a bag of shit. You don't have to put up with that.
Exactly. You deserve better, and you can get it.
So the thing about this scene is the reason I wanted to play this scene now is Killer Pinata, a low budget indie film that had a huge success. I mean, I know that you are one of the coolest dudes in the world, but even you have to admit that was a huge success for you guys. And coming out of the gate, did you know right away that you were going to want to do a sequel to this? Or was this something that as the popularity grew, you were like, they're kind of forcing our hand. We kind of got to keep the gravy train rolling.
No, I feel like it was always like, I'm a big fan of sequential storytelling. I love comic books, sequels are some of my favorite movies. And so to me, I was always interested because the first one was almost like an experiment, right? We shot it in like 7-8 days for $2,500. And so you can't really think, you're not really planning a movie. You're just reacting. You're just instinctually like, okay, let's go. And I wasn't sure anybody would actually see Killer Pinata. I mean, I thought there's a different multiverse out there where that movie went into a box and we take it out every 5 years to show our friends and family and have a laugh at this thing that we did. And so I'm very humbled and grateful that it did find an audience. And to me, I was always curious, like if we had a little more time and a little more money, what would that movie look like? Could we make it more open, right? Because I think the barrier for the first KP is it does look so punk rock and so micro budget and cheap. And so some people just can't get into that. And it's such a fun world and working with people like Eliza and all those actors and Natalie. And you want to say, okay, can we do this and have it be an inviting world where people will just see the movie for the movie and they can just judge it on story and acting and all that regular stuff without having the barrier. So it was important to me to try again,
And I think that the reason I'm bringing that up is the original versus sequel is obviously we're bringing in a new character in this film, many new characters, but the main one is the bride. And her arc throughout the story is not what you think it would be. I do want to say now, I didn't say it off the top, but I should have. This is going to be spoiler for you guys because I feel like, and I'm not saying this is lip service, there's a couple really cool twists to this movie that you guys are going to want to check out on your own. And I don't want to spoil those for you. I feel like I would be robbing you of something that is really cool. But the story behind the bride is something that turns out to be very, very special. In the writing process, is that something right away from the beginning you knew that you were going to have something very, very special to go on with the bride throughout the story of the movie? Or was it more of, let's make a sequel about the Killer Pinata and the bride be an afterthought? But then as the writing went, she started to kind of take the reins a little bit.
Yeah, from the jump. I think bride movies are such a rare thing. I mean, there's been a few of them, right? We know. And but to get the opportunity to make a bride monster movie, I always wanted to do one where the bride had as much agency as the monster she was the bride of, right? And I get why in Bride of Frankenstein you had to, spoiler alert for a very old film, but they wait until the end. The bride ends up in Act 3 in that film. And I always wanted to see a version where it was a true monster love story because bride movies are gothic and they're romantic and they're tragic and they're a bit of an opera, and they have these wonderful things. And so I thought, well, if I ever had the opportunity to tackle a Bride film, I want to make sure that this is a movie called Bride of the Killer Pinata. It is a movie about the Bride of the Killer Pinata. And so it allowed us to have a whole different bend to the entire affair by going that way.
And I love how even in this clip, is she trying to talk to us? You know, like there's that moment where us as the viewer, we know what she's saying, you know, and we automatically assume, because we can read it on the screen, that they can completely understand what this, you know, pinata is trying to communicate to them. But then we're watching it. Is she, if you can understand me, you know, I'm in the theater belly laughing at this moment, because it's one of these moments that is so almost, I hate to use the word realistic because we're talking about killer pinatas, but in this moment, that's what it would be. You know, if this thing's squeaking at you, are you trying to talk to me? Are you trying to say your boyfriend's a dick? You know, like these moments that are just so amazing. And one question I have, which might be a hard question for you to answer, because it's kind of backing you into a corner a little bit, but is there that fear of the expectations because of what Killer Pinata did? Did you go into this with that fear of, oh man, nobody's going to want to see a sequel to this. Oh man, nobody makes a sequel better than the original. I mean, obviously us as human beings, we're always scared of that fear of failure type thing. Is that something that went in that kind of made you a little bit nervous? Or was that like a situation you were ready for? Like, you know what, we've written the script. I'm confident in what we have. This is a movie that we're going to make and people are going to love this film.
Not the concept of the film, because I love watching reactions to the first KP because they run the gambit. And we like seeing what people have to say. Actually, one of our favorite reviews of Killer Pinata is someone who hated it, but the review was so well written. We were like, fair, that's great. And I knew that we didn't have such a barrier, right? We didn't create such a hit or a phenomenon that we didn't have room to move. But beyond that, this was a story that I really wanted to tell. I was like, could we take a person, our final girl, Lindsay, in the first movie, she is a college freshman. And what if we caught up to her and she's having almost the equivalent of a midlife crisis? And to kind of speak to something that everybody, I think, goes through in their life when they get to a certain age where they go, oh my God, my adult life is not what I thought my adult life would be. And by the way, your life is fine, but I think we all have these expectations that we go, well, it wasn't, whether that's emotionally, romantically, professionally, whatever that is to you. And once I got onto that beat and I knew that we could make a movie that people weren't expecting, and to do it pretty quickly when people even, I remember one of the executive producers, I sent them the script just to make sure that they understood we weren't just making a monster movie. We were making like a midlife crisis film. And he comes back and he goes, yeah, it's a lot more indie than I thought it would be. It's not the film. And I go, yeah, that's the point. And so once I knew we had that opportunity, to me, that outweighed any possible downside to making the film. I think for me, the only thing that I was a little nervous about was that we do kind of swing halfway through the film. We go into some wild territory, and I wasn't confident that the audience would follow us. And I remember we were at the premiere in Chicago, and I remember sitting in the back seat, back of the theater, just dying, going, I don't know if we're going to have one. I think we might lose them. And the fact that we didn't, was a real relief, honestly. So, yeah,
Well, I can tell you, after watching the premiere in Chicago, one, that was the first time I was ever able to do that on a film that I was in. Obviously, this is the first film I've been in, and it's quite the experience. And to hear people cheering and laughing, and you're overwhelmed with happiness, because when you work on these projects, no matter how big or small your role is, it's a part of you now. So it's always this extension of you. And after watching this movie, I learned that anything can save your life, even if it's autoerotic asphyxiation. So you always want to make sure to try new things, be open to the idea of different things in your life, no matter how old you get. So, and I will say, once you survive a moment like that, and the first thing you do is run into the coolest neighbor in the entire world walking their pet, nothing could be better than that. So
yeah, it was hard to get that actor. We had to really to get that guy.
I'm sure he was difficult on set, man. I'm sure it was not a fun day on set.
Real pain in the neck.
So we talked about the idea of a sequel and embracing the sequel and doing that. Now I want to show you guys another scene real quick, and the reason I wanted to show this scene, I'll tell you why after we watch it. But this is a scene that is very, very special to me. So check this out real quick.
Oh no, I know what you're here for. Just take it.
Just take it.
I am done. I am fucking done. Ever since one of these things came into my life, I lost a coworker. My aunt died, and when she died, I lost my ride to work. No one wants to work here because they're afraid they're gonna get murdered by one of these fucking things. No one wants to shop here because they're also afraid they're gonna get murdered by one of these fucking things. Personally, I just wish one could come to life just so I could have someone to talk to.
Jesus, man. Why don't you just quit?
Because I got nowhere else to go.
Ken, why is that scene so special to you? And there's two reasons. One, I fucking laughed my ass off watching that in the cinema. And I can't wait for you guys to see the extended moment of this clip. But also, our good friend Jesse Andrews, Slasher Sauces, is a part of this scene. And watching him come on the screen, I literally jumped up and was like, yes, like there's Jesse right there. So what was it like to film a scene like this? Did you have to rent out that store? And like, obviously you have, I call this the airplane comedy, where you have something that's happening that is so fucking goofy, but the actors are playing it so serious. Like this is a melodrama. Like what was it like on set that day, filming such a heavy scene?
Yeah. So that was really fun. We had changed that character. So the goth person that you're seeing there is Lord Chain. And we had a different character written for that, the kind of a pinata hunter. And it wasn't, as we got closer to production and pre-production, we realized that that character wasn't great. It wasn't the best it could be. So we rewrote it. And that's when we stumbled on the idea of the Chain Gang, his little group with him. And I very much wanted to get that police academy thing. If you watch those first couple, Bobcat Goldthwait's like criminal gang, they're always just screaming. They're running into grocery stores. And so Jesse I've known because Jesse has a line of wonderful hot sauces called slasher sauces, which, they're horror themed hot sauces. And you'd think that like a novelty hot sauce wouldn't be good, but this guy, just natural talent for making awesome stuff. So yeah, we became friends that way. And I asked him if he wanted to come in and do something. And so he invited a couple of his buddies in, and they're all big horror movie fans, Full Moon fans, the whole thing. And so the day before filming, all the people that signed up, including Melissa Hill, who owns Reed's Local here in Chicago, my wife Sarah's in there. I showed them the Police Academy clip, and I said, this is the energy, make sure it's just screaming and insane. And then the rest of it's just kind of how I prefer to direct Killer Pinata scenes, which is like take the most absurd thing and play it completely straight. Like we're going from like farce, right? But if you play it straight, it's funnier because this world is insane. Like it's just characters are nuts. So that day on set was really fun. We shot it at a place, Bric-a-Brac Records in Logan Square, and it's the coolest spot. And we weren't sure we were able to get it, but we approached them, we pitched them, and they were super into it. Oh, and one of the actors that's in the Chain Gang is also a part of Bric-a-Brac. So it was just really, really, really fun day out there and just having some fun in the middle of the day.
And I can't say Casey is amazing to work with. Which is our Lord Chain. And I love, why don't you just leave? How it's a mix between like anger and sadness and annoyance, like all just rolled into one. And that moment to me, I got nowhere else to go. Like it's one of those moments where when you're watching it, especially with the whole scene wrapped around with each other, this might be one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie because of, like you said, that you're playing it so straight, but you're doing and saying the goofiest things imaginable. And that to me is pure comedy. That's what I grew up with. That to me is where I've always said that horror and comedy are so closely knit because they're all about timing.
Yeah.
If your jokes don't have the right timing, they're not going to land. If your scares don't have the right timing, they're not going to land. And a movie like this does have the genuine scares, but it does have the genuine laughs, like in this moment right here. So when you go into this movie and you're doing this writing, is it something where you're purposely mindfully saying, this is going to be my scene that has comedy, this is going to be my scene that has horror? Or is it kind of just that, as you're writing, this is what feels right at this moment, this is what feels right at this moment?
It's a blend. So I go off complete instinct. If it makes me laugh, then I, like just if I start laughing at the idea, then it goes in. But we're really lucky that we, in this one particularly, that we got a cast that a lot of them were Second City trained. They are natural comedians. And so it's also a pretty good idea when you're gifted with that kind of, when you're gifted with multiple actors that have natural comedic ability to kind of get out of their way. And everyone was great. We almost, even though it's a horror film as well, we shot it like a comedy in many ways, because we would do our takes and then someone would come up and say, can I have one more take? I want to try something here. And a lot of the things that ended up in this movie were those guys and what they threw out on, and we were just laughing, and you go, okay, well, that's it. That's what's sticking in the film,
Absolutely. And another reason why I wanted to show this scene right here is he talks a little bit about, the people that have died, or the customers that won't come in because people have died. So in the first film, you obviously have your set of characters that you want to bring back and you want to, revolve around. But in making this film, you've brought in a lot of new characters. What was that struggle of juggling the introduction of new characters and making them relevant versus having people still loving your OG characters from the original film?
Well, it was a little more tricky on this one, because we essentially had, I think sequels have two buckets of characters, right? You have your OGs, and then you have your new guys that are new to everybody. And then we had kind of a third group, which we're kind of in the ether. So in 2018, we had tried to make a sequel then, and it failed. So to keep it clear, we'll call that Killer Pinata 2 and This Bride. So we tried to make Killer Pinata 2, and we shot a fake trailer, and we were so confident we were going to make that movie. It was fully casted. We were ready to go. We thought we were going to hit our funding goal and be filming it, a couple of weeks later, and it didn't happen. And so the question we walked into this movie with at the very beginning was, are we going to consider Killer Pinata 2 canon? Or are we going to forget everything we built there and just treat Bride as like the new starting point? And because we had a trailer out there, it was almost like a little bit of a short film. I thought we had a way in to work with some of those characters that we kind of got robbed of working with in the beginning, right? Shane the cowboy being one of them, and then obviously Lindsay's wife in this movie, Nat. They were both introduced in what would have been the second one. It would have been impossible to get them into this film without having the beginning monologue, the montage where Lindsay talks about her life. That gave us an in, because it was really important to us that this movie be a standalone thing. If you had never seen a Killer Pinata film, you could sit down in the theater, you had everything you needed to enjoy this film. You didn't need to invest any more time but what you had right here. And so because of that opening montage, we were able to work in kind of this third group of characters, which we've never actually seen them in a movie, but we're familiar enough with them, but now they're in the film. So it was an interesting mix. And then we had to debate, how many new characters do you bring in? How many legacy characters do you bring? How do you, give all that weight and still have a clean story and not just make this thing a narrative mess? And I remember one character, so we have a second antagonist in this film. And we originally started with a whole different idea of who that would be. And it was also being pulled from another film, an earlier film. And we thought to ourselves, we're asking, here we are dragging another character in. This is a bad plan. You can only have so many legacy people coming in. You want more new people. So then we changed that character altogether to be a brand new creation, which I think was just the right call to keep things very clean for the audience. Very, very, you could follow the whole thing. So.
But even in the theater, the pop, the excitement when Shane the cowboy hit the screen was ridiculous, man. It was awesome. Old school wrestling term there with pop, but the theater erupted when you heard the music and Shane walks on the screen. Everybody went absolutely insane. And I do like the way that the other antagonist is played out. That's when it comes to the writing process and watching how the film plays out, that's one of my favorite parts of the film, is how intelligently our other antagonist is a part of this film. So Now, I've drug you guys on long enough. As you know, your boy is in the film. So we're going to jump right into a clip of the scene that I was a part of.
Keep this thing in the basement?
What else is the basement good for? Besides a sex dungeon. Bingo.
Dude, what the fuck are you doing?
Grabbing the target.
That thing has killed like 1,000 people.
It's a pinata. That's their fault. So that good-looking guy may be in for a world of trouble here in a little bit, but this was honestly, Ashley and I, we drove to Chicago. We spent the night out there, and this was one of the most fun days of filming that I can remember in a long time that I've done, you know, in my personal experience, because as a lot of you know, I did create the short film with Ashley, Home is Where the Haunt Is. And earlier, Stephen talked about being in a rental house for 3 days, and that's all you get to shoot your film. And that was, you know, that was us with Home is Where the Haunt Is. And this day, we got to be there with a whole crew. You know, Ryan was there, who's amazing. We had amazing makeup happening that day. There was so many, obviously there's a lot of crazy shit that happens in the scene, but the in between takes, all there was complete and total laughter. And I can't talk about other parts of the movie because I wasn't there, but was that something that you were really trying to capture all along behind the scenes when the camera wasn't rolling, to just have as much fun as you possibly could every minute you could?
100%. Well, let's back up for a second, because we talked about Shane's reaction when the cowboy showed up, but I believe when you walked down those stairs, and I told this to Jen, that theater erupted, and I was like, oh man, Ken's got a fan club, because the moment you came down those stairs, that theater, you know, was just applauding. And I was like, this is very, very cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of you know, running a set, especially when you're trying to have fun with something like this, I mean, I think I never believed in the philosophy that you had to be a dictator. You know, I love reading stories about how John Carpenter ran his sets, and it was always this idea of like, you know, we're going to run into problems. We can't scream our way out of them. You know, all we can do is get together as a bunch of smart filmmakers and performers, and we will figure it out. You know, those fires sometimes give you the best stuff. And when you're trying to create comedy and you're trying to create absurdity, it's better just to be kind of laughing and getting through it. And you know, we're a small crew, we're a small cast, and so it also just kind of helps the day when you know you're getting good work. But you can kind of take that pressure off a little bit and be like, okay. And those were, you know, that was a big sequence. That was an important sequence that you're in. We knew. We read what people say about Killer Pinata, and the number one thing that people seem to have an issue with, which is fair, I think, is that it takes a minute. That the first one takes a minute to get into like these bigger things. So we designed that sequence. We knew it was coming in at 20 minutes. We're like 20 minutes into the movie, we're going all out for a second here. And we did. And so we knew that we, you know, and we were lucky enough that we had a couple of days there. The folks that had that house were on vacation. They were lovely to give us free reign of the place so that we could shoot.
Beautiful little house, man.
Yeah. They were great. And so knowing that we had to deliver on that sequence, it just helped us get through it and not think about what it meant if we didn't get it, you know?
Well, and another big thing about this whole sequence is you were talking earlier about how you wanted other people to have their own creative inputs. And I'll never forget, there was a moment where, again, I'm not going to get too deep into the spoiler, but all I'm going to say is, should I be petting it? And the way that your eyes lit up when that question was asked, and, you know, I'm watching the final version and I watched this happen. And this is a moment that, you know, 9 out of 10 people may not even realize is happening. Mm-hmm. But I'm watching it and I'm just laughing because I remember that moment of, you know, should I be petting it? And just the way that your eyes lit up and everybody on set just started laughing. And it was like, yeah, that absolutely needs to happen. And is that something that you've learned through time, like working with your actors, or is this something that's always been a natural thing to you? As I know there's a lot of people that are, and there's nothing wrong with this, but there's a lot of people are, look, this is my vision, this is my way, and this is the way we're going to do it. And again, if that's what works for you, I'm not going to bitch about it. But from my experience on set with you, it was, this is my vision, but this is our film. And if you guys have recommendations, please throw them at me, because obviously you guys are putting your blood, sweat, and tears into this too. You're not going to tell me something that's going to be fucking stupid. So that was something I respected and loved about working with you too. Is that a way that you've always been, or have you kind of come to appreciate the actor's input on things?
Oh, I think it's very important. I think that, a director, basically you're a conductor, right? And your job is to harmonize all these sections, not just the day of. You want to make sure your actors are harmonizing, they're listening to each other. But then you're also in the back of your head going, well, how are we scoring this scene? How are we cutting this scene? Are we doing something today that's going to be agreeable down the line of production? And I think my internal math on this is like, as long as we're kind of in that ballpark, as long as it's harmonizing, I'm very open, because that's an exciting thing for me. I think because, I'm with it from the jump, from writing and all that stuff, that's an exciting part when someone comes in. And again, this cast was so cool about just bringing ideas. Every single cast member, we'd have long discussions, which is, I think, rare for indie film. Casey talking about Lord Chain, another character. I'm going to keep that character out because it's a spoiler, but let's go with Casey talking about Lord Chain. We'd have these long conversations about, who Lord Chain was, how to play him, throwing it out, and just talking through all this stuff. And to me, that's a really exciting part of it, because you can still be surprised so far into the process, where you've thought about these scenes and you've blocked them and you're lighting them and stuff. And then an actor goes, why don't we do this? And you just start laughing and you're like, correct, let's go.
Right. I got to live one of those moments with you, and it was amazing because, I'm a rookie in this moment. This is only like my third production I've been a part of, and I'm watching you, this guy that I respect, that, I got to land a role in here, and I'm watching your eyes light up like it's your first time too. Like, oh my God, that's a brilliant idea. And I feel like, as somebody that's been on both sides of the camera, I've directed people and I've worked for people, I feel like as an actor, it makes me want to work harder for that director, because he hears me. He respects me and he hears me. So I'm going to give him 100% every single take. And you guys are seeing right now some pictures of us behind the scenes. And I can tell you, it was a nonstop riot that day. And just watching Casey go from his Lord Chain attitude back into, in between takes, talking to Casey, the way that he was just so influential on me too. The way that he was so kind and sweet and generous. But then when Lord Chain kicked in, Casey was Lord Chain. So you talked earlier about how you had a couple different people in line. I think you guys, Jen, knocked it out of the park by finally taking Casey as the role, because he was amazing. He absolutely was phenomenal in the role of Lord Chain.
Well, we told him, we had so many good options for Lord Chain, and he makes a couple of different appearances in this film. And I think his was the only audition where he did one of the other appearances that made us laugh. We just started laughing, and we just knew, we were like, okay, if he makes us laugh when he's not Lord Chain, then that's who we have to go. But to go back to something you were talking about, I think it is important, I appreciate that you act and direct, because I think it's so intimidating and it's so important. I think writers, screenwriters should try directing, even if it's a short film. And I think directors should try acting, because I think a lot of the issues on set, a lot of the patience that people lose between themselves on a production, are because they don't understand what the other person's going through, right? Like,
right.
I think directors think, well, you're an actor. We just turn on the camera. It is intimidating walking into a scene with a camera and trying to act and knowing the camera's there and not knowing how. It's not like a stage play. A stage play, you just see who you are, but you don't know how you're appearing on that camera or what's going on. And so I think going through that process, you get a little empathy, and so I guess one question I had for you on House was, on the scenes where you were acting, was Ashley directing those scenes, or were you kind of directing those scenes and then being like, let's do playback?
Ashley completely directed. It was a mix between me, Ashley, and our friend Bill. He's been my best friend since I was about 5 years old. Okay. He made the trip from Florida up here for that weekend. He had been a big part of the writing process. He was a big part of the editing process, everything. And he came up for that weekend with the intent of us just filming my scenes that weekend. And the scene, he's the one that plays the apparition spirit, the bearded guy on the porch. That's Bill.
Wow.
So in scenes where I was actually on camera, Bill and Ashley are the ones back there that are deciding, hey, well, let's try this. Like Ashley's the one that came up with the idea. There's a scene in the movie that you guys are watching right now where I'm walking to the camera and I pretty much walk right through the camera. And when I walked in, Ashley was like, well, why don't we try this? And we tried it. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And it's just the smallest, easiest camera trick. I literally walked into the camera. We cut, put the camera on my back, called action, and I walked. So, with that split, it just looks like I'm walking right through the camera. And Ashley thought of that on spur of the moment. And Bill was like, dude, that was brilliant. Like, we're watching it. And that still to this day is one of my favorite extended scenes of the film, just watching me walk right through the camera and knowing that the creativity between me, my wife, and my best friend, how we're all gelling in this moment and we're seeing these things. And we also learned, because there's a scene in Home is Where the Haunt Is, where we have a noose. And I'm not going to go too much into that, but we did learn that if you go on Google and search how to make a noose, a lot of suicide prevention things pop up immediately before you can get into any instructional video. So if you guys are watching this channel for the first time, I do have a link to Home is Where the Haunt Is down here in the description, as well as the social media links for Angry Mule Productions. I have their YouTube link down here as well. Real quick before I let you go, there's one more scene I want to talk about and a couple more things I want to say. This one is not part of the film. This is one that we got behind the scenes. I just kind of want to show you guys what it was like on set when we were having a good time real quick.
I love this stuff.
Woo!
You guys are
Yes!
my friends.
Let's go!
Yeah.
Woo! Yeah!
Do it right now.
Yeah!
I want to say real quick, when he yelled out, you guys are my friends, I almost pissed my pants while we were acting in that moment. And this should hopefully give you guys an idea of what Steven was talking about earlier with the police academy, rowdy people that are there on, with Lord Chain. So when we were filming the scene, I remember the minute that you yelled cut, and you guys can see Steven in the shot, the minute that you yelled cut, we all just fucking died laughing. And it was one of those things where it was just the awkwardness of it, but it was so unexpected because Steven, you were like, you know what? Just yell shit, shit, have a good time. Let's see what happens here. And it was such an amazing feeling to have that type of independence in a scene like this. So one thing I just wanted to show you guys a little behind the scenes, because I love behind the scenes. So I wanted to show you guys that. I'm going to ask you a question, Steven. And if you can't answer, you can't answer. I respect it. 50-50 shot here that I'm going to get an answer, but I want to know, what are the odds that this becomes a trilogy in the future?
Oh,
I know Bride hasn't even come out yet, and I'm looking ahead, but I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, it's funny going through this. So the short answer is I don't know. I know. Here's what I do know. I have a story in mind. I've always thought like I could do one more. And the bar that I set for myself was, one, do we have a story? Do we actually have a good story that we can go into and make it worth people's time? And two, can we up the production value again? The jump from the first one to this one, can we do kind of the similar jump from this one to the next one?
Sure.
And for the longest time, I didn't have an idea for another one. It was kind of like I had a vague idea for the first one. I had a really clear idea for this one. And all through production, I kind of thought, well, this is it. I don't really have any, if I don't have an idea, I'm not going to force it.
Yes.
But now I have something that, again, going back to like, I'll just start laughing out loud as I think of different sequences. And I think the question that we have to figure out is really now the business of it, because we made the first one for, a couple thousand. We made this one for about 17,000. And what we realized is that we're too old. We don't have the energy to do another Killer Pinata for like sub, 50,000 or whatever. We need the money for like a crew and an actual, like, it just, this one, it was nice because we had more time, but by the end of it, we were all just like super gassed. And it's because, we had a crew of 3. You're hauling in all the C-stands, you're setting up all the lights, every day you film, there's 3 days of prep around that. And not even just like the classic, like director prep where you're like, figure out, you're the costumer, you're the puppeteer, you're the puppet maker, you're all that stuff. And so I think what we've said internally is, if this one does well and we are lucky and it takes off and finds an audience in a way that we hope it does, and someone comes through and says, yeah, I can give you that, a responsible budget. We're not being like, we need 20 million for Killer Pinata. If we had what's a responsible budget for a low budget horror film and you can just get a little more help on the set, in a minute, I would do that third one, because we have a lot of the actors in place. We have, I think, a really good story, and it would be a fun way to like finish off this just really cool time in our lives of making Killer Pinata movies. So.
That's awesome, man. And you just touched on something that I was going to talk about. We talked earlier about how you were a writer and director, but I got to give you the props because you were the cameraman. You ran sound. You were working puppeteer work. Like, you are a busy guy. So I can see how you could get burned out on it. But at the same time, when you're watching this back, does that have an even bigger, do you think, feeling of completion of like, yes, like I'm watching all these different things that I was able to be a part of. And, does that increase that, what's the word? Like almost that glee, does that increase that for you to see all the hard work pay off in the end?
Not in that way. I think what I feel is grateful, because I'm surrounded, like we are talking about earlier, I'm very lucky that I have someone like Paul Summers, who's like a visualist. Paul's our director of photography, and he sorted out how to shoot this movie on our tiny budget to make it look amazing. Someone like Ryan, who not only is our sound recordist, but created a just amazing banging film score. I'm a huge film score fan. And even without my bio, I'm like, no, you created a great score. It's a great film score, and did a great mix job. And then of course our actors. And so you sit back and there's a million ways. I always am surprised when people are happy that a movie didn't work, for whatever that is.
It's gross.
It's a weird thing, because I feel a profound sense of sadness for them, because everybody went into it. They gave it, making films is tough. And if you can make one that works, there's science behind it, and alchemy and timing. And so you just have to say like, wow, thank God this all worked. And I just remember after that screening, our premiere screening in Chicago, and I think I had a sense of it as we were getting close that we actually pulled this off. And I just remember being, profoundly grateful that I was like, wow, at this moment in time, we got all these very talented people together, and we all put our hands on this thing and sculpted it. And I couldn't be prouder of what we came out with. And if nothing else, if this movie, I'm hoping it finds an audience. If it doesn't, I'll always look back with fond memories and be like, man, I am so happy we made Bride of Killer Pinata,
Well, what I wanted to say is, obviously I'm not going to spoil anything, but if this is the end, it's a perfect ending. That's something I want to say. There is a great ending to this movie where there's not that cliffhanger or any, you do tie up a lot of the loose knots at the end of this film. And if there is a trilogy, I'm throwing my name in the hat now. I would like to meet that Pinata again. Obviously, I got the shirt on. I was going to cross off Killer Pinata and write Sledge, because me and this Pinata have been having a lot of back and forth on the internet. I don't know if you guys know or not, but the last question I have for you, Stephen, before I let you go, I know that right now we're going through the festival circuit and, the premieres and everything, which is super special. And we've been picked up by a couple more festivals, which I think is incredible. I'm so proud of you guys, for you and Jen and everybody else that's a part of this project, because being able to meet you guys, it's this genuine. Jen, I don't know if she'll be mad at me for saying this, guys, but we're at the premiere and Jen is literally tearing tickets for people. Like, it's not like she's just sitting up and, watching from the back. She's tearing tickets and counting people in. Like, that's the type of person that she is. And that's the love that she has for this film. And she's willing to go and work concession almost to make sure that people are getting in. They're getting in on time. People are in their seats for the opening speech. And, between you and her, it was just, you feel like you're with your family. So this couldn't happen to you are the two best people this could possibly happen for. And everybody else that's a part of this film, I'm not trying to undercut you, the actors, the actresses. Ryan, like you said, Ryan is completely amazing. One of the coolest dudes in the whole world. And Casey's amazing. And I'm just so proud of what you guys were able to do with the sequel. And I genuinely mean that. Even if I wasn't a part of this, it was the time my dad came out to the premiere. You know what I mean? And me and my dad, we have a great relationship, but it's not like, we're not as close as we could be. But my own dad was like, I wouldn't miss this for the world, and like I was able to bring him out there and introduce him to you guys and watch a film with him that I was in. And if anything else, I have a memory that I'll be able to share with, my kids, and they'll be able to share with their kids for the rest of their lives. So I just want to say, if this is the end, it's the perfect ending. But not only for my desire to see a third film, but for my desire to see what you and Jen can cook up for us again. I'm really hoping that we can get another part to this story.
Yeah, they're just incredibly unique movies to make because the concept is so absurd. It gives you a lot of room to play with genres and tone, and it's almost Looney Tunes. You can do whatever you want with it, and that's rare. You don't get too much of that, and so secretly I have my fingers crossed, not just being like, I want to make another movie, but I want to make another movie with these people, and including the actors, like to have another, sorry, you can hear my dog. He is really on top of it right now. Okay. Come down here 1 second, buddy. Geez, okay. So to have an opportunity to work with these guys again would be really fun.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like, after this film, this pinata has just been following me around.
Oh my God.
So I do want to say one more time, guys, all the links for Angry Mule Productions is all down in the description. So make sure you're checking that out. And what I was getting into before my brain went all, there's a squirrel. We are in the festival circuit, and you guys are, do we have any type of inclination on when we will get a streaming release or a physical media release?
Not yet. And I'm not trying to blow us up, but this is just the honest surprise for me.
Yeah.
We originally thought that we were going to do our premiere in Chicago, and then we were just going to self-release on Tubi and Amazon and whatever else. We were going to handle it in-house. And because of the response, we have taken a step back. And we actually weren't even planning on doing film festival. It was only as we were getting closer and people started watching the film and we were starting to see the positive reaction to it that we were like, well, we'll dip a toe in the water. We'll submit to some film festivals and see how it goes. Got in. We were like, okay, let's take a breather. So we're now going to take a kind of a longer stroll with it. We're going to do film festivals throughout the spring, maybe early summer. In a couple of months, we've already kind of made contact with some of the horror distributors to kind of have some conversations and see if we can do something that makes sense. No matter what, the movie will be out sometime in the next 6 months or so. And it kind of just depends on how we continue to do with the film festivals, how those conversations go with distributors, and then we'll probably have a clearer idea, my guess, sometime around March.
Okay. And the best thing that you guys can do to stay up to date on that is to follow them on social media. So, and it's one of those things where it's almost a catch-22 for me, because obviously I want to see it. I want the physical release. I want my friends and family to be able to see what this thing that I've been bragging about for 2 years, but let it succeed, man. Let it keep going in these festivals. That's amazing. Like, I'm so happy.
Well, yeah. And it's a way to, I think, what's funny and true talk, I think that there is a lot of hesitation to watch something that says Killer Pinata. I think people think that it's going to be a complete write-off. They don't want to do it. I understand that they look maybe at the first movie and they say, oh, those are just kind of cheap, silly movies. But I think what happens is that the film festivals will help introduce this movie to a broader audience. And hopefully there, folks who see it and like it will tell their friends, and we can just slowly start building some confidence that the movie isn't what you think it is. It's a totally different beast than what you think this movie is going to be. So
huge human element to this movie.
Yeah.
A huge element of love, of parental love, of grandparental love, of, love from one human to another, of, there's sorrow, genuine sorrow in this film. So I get what you're saying, because I tell people, oh, I'm in a movie, Bride of Killer Pinata, and they're like,
yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, listen, I'm telling you right now, there's so much more human element to this movie than you could ever imagine by hearing the title. So please, don't knock it till you try it. If you watch this movie and you genuinely don't feel sad, scared, or laugh throughout the movie, then you're right. You beat me. But I can almost guarantee you're going to feel those three emotions more than once throughout this movie.
Yeah, 100%. That was our goal, was to be like, how do you make a movie that no one sees coming? So we'll see. I
did lie. There is one more question I have. Did we get a rating for the film?
Oh no, I am terrified to send. I don't know that we can get this movie through with an R rating. I think we're gonna have to keep it unrated, because when I think about what I've heard, I mean, I've never run a movie by the ratings board, but from what I heard, what they deem gets you an NC-17, we definitely hit it. So I don't know. We might just do it for fun. Why not? Let's just, because it also cracks me up the idea that the ratings board would sit down and watch Bride of Killer Pinata and be like, NC-17.
Again, I'm not trying to spoil anything, but there's a major scene that I'm in, and I remember we're filming it, and in between takes, I hear you, and you're talking, I believe it was Ryan, and you're like, man, we're never going to hit an R rating on this.
Yeah, there's a behind the scenes that someone got of that same scene of what we're talking about, and it's me telling one of the actors who came in that day and didn't see the script, and I'm walking them through everything that happens in that scene, and you can just see their face and like the clock ticking of like, this movie's never getting released, it's never getting rated. So yeah.
But it's funny, at that moment, the moment that we're talking about, when that happened in the theater, there was definitely that mix of ooh and ah, complete belly laughter, and the awkwardness of me sitting next to my stepmom, all rolled up into one big package. So I would not change this for the world, Steven. I mean that with all my heart. The things that I learned on set that day, the things that I've been able to take away from that, the friendships that I've made from being a part of this production means more to me than you could ever know, man. So
well, thank you for
everybody. I do want to no, man, absolutely. And I want to remind everybody, thank you. You know, we do this stuff because we love to make films, but especially during that big P word, you guys really help to keep indie film going. People like me, I watch indie film all the time through streaming services. So thank you for continuing to support indie filmmakers. And please make sure you're checking out Angry Mule Productions. Make sure you're checking out The Bride of Killer Pinata. I can't wait for you guys to see this. Steven, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.